So my talk was titled by Arrison, actually, Investment as an Innovation Vehicle. It could be called Incentives as an Innovation Vehicle, or it could be called Incentives as an Innovation Vehicle to promote longevity, because that's actually what I'm most interested in. Many of you probably know me because you've read my book, 100 Plus, How the Coming Age of Longevity Will Change Everything from Careers and Relationships to Family and Faith. Thank you. That's so nice. If you haven't read it, it's available on Amazon. It was a bestseller when it came out, and it's still making the rounds. But you know, my goal, as it says on the slide, is moving towards a world of healthy, long-lived humans. So longevity to me doesn't mean like living longer in a disease state. It means being healthy longer. It means extending health span. And I think we're still trying to get that message out, actually, which is kind of crazy to me because it just seems like it's so obvious. But we have to keep saying it over and over again. So I wrote the book, and it was published in 2011. I wrote it at that time, the why now, because I could see, I was doing a bunch of research into sort of accelerating technologies, and I could see that the science to repair humans had finally come to the point where it was available. We had finally reached this point in history that we had never before reached, where we actually had the tools to repair ourselves and not just keep ourselves alive for longer in a sicker state, but fix ourselves. And I'll say something else, which I have never said publicly before, by the way. This is the first time. But I think it's time. The time is now that I'm actually doing longevity investing. I've seen so many companies. I actually believe that we can turn back the clock also. And normally I would not say that publicly because it used to sound crazy, you know, and I'm not a crazy. I even hesitate to use the word anti-aging because I think that still has all these connotations. Although you can see in the regular media, when like even now when I'm reading about some of the companies that I'm investigating or companies that I wish I invested in but I didn't, the regular media is calling them anti-aging companies, which is fascinating to me because, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that would have been a crazy, crazy thing to say. But it's not crazy today because the science is real. So I wrote this book, it became a bestseller, I did book tour, and then I took a little hiatus and started a media company, which had nothing to do with longevity, sold it to Medium, and then I came back and I was gonna write another book. But I looked at the industry and I said, you know what? What's needed is not another book. What's needed is investment because the time is now and the science is ready. So I don't know, probably everybody remembers this cover, right, of Time magazine. I certainly remember it in 2013 because they called me the night before it was published, and they asked me if I would write an article to go along with their magazine cover. Actually, Aubrey was asked to write an article also, and I don't know if you remember Aubrey, but I remember thinking they wouldn't tell me what company it was. They said some big company is going to make a big announcement tomorrow that they were going to be, you know, fighting death, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. Who is it? And of course, they wouldn't tell me. And so I spent 24 hours wondering, and I didn't guess correctly. I don't know if you did or not. You did. Oh, well, good on you. You know, it's funny that I didn't because my husband actually used to work at Google, and I know tons of Google people. But maybe that's why it just wasn't in my headspace. So, yeah. But I think you know, it's great that Google started Calico as their first longevity bet. And, you know, I mean, people complain that they haven't seen a lot coming out of Calico, but I think one of the most important things that Calico did for us as a society is it legitimized the sector. It said, hey, there's real smart people with some real big money putting dollars behind the science that exists to turn it into innovations that can have an impact on your life. And that was epic. And so I've listed a few, you know, so I made my first investment I have a little company of my own called 100 Plus Capital. I made my first investment in a longevity company about 1.5 years ago. And that doesn't sound like very long ago, does it? And it wasn't. And I've made a number of investments since then. But honestly, investment in this space is new. And, you know, back in 2011, when my book was published, there were the only fund that existed was Laura Deming's longevity fund, and she had just started it after I wrote my book. I remember having coffee with her. I think she's supposed to be here, but I don't see her. I remember having coffee with her and her telling me, yeah, I'm going to start this VC fund to invest in longevity companies. And even back then, I mean, I had just written a book on how great this stuff was, but I sort of looked at her and went, oh, well, yeah, it's not really ready yet. But she didn't listen to me, which is great because she's doing some amazing things, and I'm very happy for her, and I'm co-invested with her on a few things. So she was one of the very first to see that the science was ready to be taken to the next step. The inventors were ready to meet the innovators, right? And then, of course, others followed, like Bold Capital, Apollo Ventures, the Longevity Vision Fund, and all of these are like pretty new in the last 3 to 5 years. So longevity, investment in longevity is increasing. Like I said, it was like almost $0 in 2011. And today it's around $4 billion that's been raised for the purpose, which is huge, right? And it will continue to grow for sure. And that's because aging is both a problem and an opportunity. The problem is that like people are getting old and they're getting sick and dying, and nobody likes that. And there will be more of them, as you can see here, by 2050, there'll be more people 60 or over than those aged 10 to 24 globally. So fewer people to help the older people as well. So that's a problem. And then, the opportunity is that there's this spending power. There's a lot of dollars. I mean, the opportunity is people are willing to pay for their health. They're willing to pay a lot for their health. But that's not enough for investment. You can't just have a problem and an opportunity. You also have to have a solution, real solutions. It has to be real science. It can't be snake oil, right? And so, the fortunate reality is that there are real solutions out there. And these are some of the categories. I mean, this is certainly not extensive, but these are some of the categories I'm looking at when I'm investing. And some of the categories that have made it possible to really innovate. So I just wanted to get our definitions clear. You've heard me going back and forth between invention and innovation. And I just wanted to make it really, just so we're thinking about it, right? So an invention is the creation of a product or introduction of a process for the first time. So Charles Babbage, who created the world's first mechanical computer, was an inventor. He made something for the first time. Innovation happens when somebody improves on that. So Steve Jobs, for instance, was an innovator. And so we've got all this incredible, this big, big list of inventions that are just screaming out for innovators. And honestly, I think this is sometimes where I see the problem actually, is because sometimes the inventors want to be the innovators. And it's I don't know how Charles Babbage would have been as an entrepreneur. I have no idea. Maybe he would have been great, but that would have been unique, because usually people who are inventors, there's so many I words here, inventors are not great innovators. And so that's where I'm finding the hiccups in the work that I'm doing right now, is trying to put together the right teams of innovators with the inventors and making it all work so that we can get the products that we want. So I just wanted to sort of close on two thoughts. One, this is not just about the money, by the way. I mean, I really think that investment in longevity technology aligns incentives with ethics. It's ethical to want to reduce human suffering. It's ethical to help people be healthy and not sick. I mean, this is really, truly one of the most important goals. I mean, it's the most important goal for me. And so I just wanted to take us back. You're probably wondering why it says, "Why does the baker bake bread?" on my slide. I just wanted to take us back to classic economics and say, well, why does the baker bake bread? He doesn't bake it for the good of humanity. He doesn't say, ooh, I think that society was so much better off if everybody had bread, and so I'm just going to bake it for everybody. No, he says, well, I need to provide for my family. I need to provide for my children. I need to pay my rent. What am I good at? I'm good at baking bread. I'm going to do that, make some money so I can provide for my family, and that's how society works. Incentives matter. And so, I feel like I'm part of this group of people now who are incentivizing the bakers of the longevity world to create products for everybody else so that we can have a better, healthier world. And so then the last thing I'll just say is, thank you, Foresight. I really think we should celebrate investment in longevity companies, and we should celebrate Foresight because it's one of the one of the organizations that I think does a really great job of not only putting on these technical conferences that I mentioned earlier, like really diving into the real science, but also networking people together and bringing them together so that the inventors can find the innovators, and all of that synergy can happen, and we can make the world a better place. So that's it.
Thank you, Sonia. Yeah, as I said, I'm really thrilled that we have such a really strong longevity track later in today, but also tomorrow. And I think that's partly due to a few of the salons that we did this year. And I think there's much more coordination really needed in this space. And I think people are really kind of like rallying up. Do you guys have a question for her to kick us off with? Kriyan is just nodding along as you're presenting. He's like, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say is yes, yes, yes. I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for the talk and for everything that the talk is summarizing.
All right, Brian?
So I was thinking that there's an overlap between what Tom Khalil was talking about and the longevity aspect. It seems like there would a lever to move policy-wise that could open things up for longevity is to have a risk-adjusted FDA approval process. Because as people age, of course, you're going to hit that health span cliff where things just start going bad for you pretty quick. So we can statistically model that even by the individual level, and you can say, okay, you're within your 5 years of getting toward the cliff, and you're now allowed to take more risk. People are not doing that for themselves. Bill Falloon had the group where people take senolytics based on off-label purpose drugs. So that's kind of like though people giving themselves their own abortion kind of thing, where they're taking some chances, that kind of thing. So it seems that we can make that a more, bring it into the light and structure and make it safe.
Yeah. So another opportunity is the identification of what the FDA calls surrogate endpoints. So one question is, if you're doing a clinical trial, what is it that you have to demonstrate? So for an oncology drug, for example, you can get a oncology drug approved in some circumstances if you can make the tumor shrink. So what are the surrogate endpoints for these types of interventions? I think that's a really interesting area for public policy.
Is there a question embedded? I mean, I think the FDA is really important, and there's a movement right now to try to get the FDA to acknowledge, to see that aging is a disease, and once that happens, that will actually impact the innovation sector, because then companies can go straight towards proving that they're an anti-aging agent, rather than, right now the shorthand is, oh, I'm a cancer company, I'm a diabetes company. They go after the diseases of aging when they're really doing an anti-aging company.
Yeah, so just turning my thing into a question, I was just saying, like, could my suggestion about risk-adjusted FDA approvals be formalized, made into a policy? That's something we should try and target, that kind of thing. That was my question.
Well, I guess it could if you had the right people in government and they were willing to listen to it. Yeah, you're reminding me of my grandfather. After he turned 100, he started trying a whole bunch of different supplements because he's like, who cares? It's like, at this point, I'm not going to get cancer. And yeah, so he lived to 103.
Kriyan, you have another one? And please hold the mic close to you.
All right. So I have...
oh, that's very soul-y.
Yeah. I have a question, which is maybe something we'll have to talk about later, but I'll ask it here. So this is very optimistic and makes me enthusiastic. On the other hand, we have a terrible problem with big pharma in this country and worldwide now. It's like a very corrupt system with a huge amount of, I would argue, in many cases, a huge amount of overprescription of drugs that don't do people or society any good, or it's not worth it. Does more harm than good. The incentives are misaligned. And how do we prevent this from going the same way? Like, we've got, you know what I'm saying. We have a problem, and more pharmaceuticals in the hands of the people who've been pushing the current batches may not be the right answer.
Right. Well, I think it all depends on what happens on that score. I think you're right that there is a problem with big pharma. They tend to act as sort of monopoly type players, and and try to squeeze out any type of competition. It's interesting because some of them are realizing, I mean, I think what's going to happen, some of them are realizing that they better get into this space quickly or they may become dinosaurs because, I mean, honestly, if any of these, can you imagine if a senolytic company, if a company creates a senolytic that actually works incredibly, like dramatically well, right? That they're not going to want to be bought by pharma. They're going to be their own company. Suddenly, they're competition, and big pharma has problems. So, I mean, I think some in big pharma are realizing this, and I think others just have the blinders on. And so, I think actually we're going to see a shakeup in that space going forward because many of the players in big pharma are not going to see what's coming because they just didn't quite believe it was here.
All right, sweet. One last quick question, and I'm super interested in this. It's from the anonymous cards. How can we pull more investors into the longevity space?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I'm working on that all the time, by the way. I'm an advisor to a couple of different regular VC funds. And when I say regular, I mean like they invest in tech. They're typical Silicon Valley tech companies. And I try to sort of bring them into the fold. And I've noticed over the last year and a half that there's more of these sort of more traditional VC firms interested. Felicis Ventures is one that I work with, and obviously the folks at Founders Fund have been doing this for a long time. And I know Andreessen Horowitz is starting to is very, very interested in this space. And so it's kind of like it's a little domino effect. Once a couple of them do it, they all fall,
Okay, great.
or the
They
fire
all
starts to
fall.
spark.
All right,
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much, Sonia.